Hello everyone and welcome to Cellmate, the podcast by Multiplier Labs, where we invite here leaders from the robotics and from the bio and pharma space, and we have conversations at the forefront of automation and biomanufacturing. So here today with us we have
Connor Kennedy. I'm the Global Industry Manager for Pharmaceuticals for Universal Robots. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a good point you made of the confluence of pharmaceutical manufacturing and robotics ends up being a very small spot on that Venn diagram. So glad to be here.
Very happy to have you here. My name is Fred. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Multiplier Labs. And so how does Cellmates work? Well, we start with questions that neither me nor Connor have ever seen, and we answer them together. Okay, so let's dive into the first question. Here it is. Here. Fred and Connor, how did you each end up at the intersection of robots in pharma?
That's a great question. So I'll go first. I'm sure you've probably had this kind of conversation a few times. But so I went to Penn State, and when I was there, really started with my mechatronics course, and then I actually ended up going up to the professor and asking for a position in his lab. So I got a position in the autonomous vehicles lab at Penn State and started getting hands-on with autonomous vehicles and being able to see the capability of mixing, the mechanical engineering side, software engineering, electrical engineering into robotic systems was incredible. But then out of school, I joined Merck, the U.S. vaccine manufacturer, and got to work in some of the coolest applications. I wouldn't call them robotic to start. A lot of these systems are automatic, but not the traditional 6-axis arm that you think of. But then as I evolved in that, in the global engineering systems, as a mechanical engineer in a company that was mostly driven by chemical engineers, I got a lot of the robotics projects as they really started to initiate within the pharmaceutical industry, which, again, there's not a huge understanding of robotics in that industry. So so I got a lot of those robotics projects, and that expertise is what led me as actually the head of the Cobot Center of Excellence at Merck. And then kind of that expertise drove me to the opportunity for the industry manager for pharmaceuticals at Universal Robots. So that's how I ended up here.
Wow, that is fantastic. From my point of view, building robots is all I've always done, starting from the mechanical engineering side. My research in grad school, back in Boston and MIT was wearable robots. So I always had this idea. I always enjoyed building robots that help people.
Yeah.
But then when we started Multiplier Labs, and we thought, well, what if robots could be helpful, in terms of manufacturing and making, medicines that people really need.
Yeah.
At larger scale and in a more effective, efficient way. So that's it. And for me also, it's very important that I've always been fascinated both by the engineering side, but also by the biology side. Biology looks like engineering, but almost like even more advanced and less understood. And so having the opportunity of working on both of them is kind of like irresistible. We all love to work with immunologists here and pharma companies and so on. We feel like we learn a lot. And you're right, they don't have robotics departments. So they also feel like, I would say Merck was probably a rare exception. And so they also feel like they have a lot to learn from engineers. So it's a fantastic pairing.
And again, what value you bring as, Multiply Labs to be able to show this expertise to these companies where they really understand, the manufacturing, the regulatory aspect, but automation. That's why, again, joining Universal Robots, I wanted to be that kind of advisor to these pharmaceutical companies. And again, I'm sure you're the same position.
Yep. At first, when you're in these meetings with, pharma innovators and, these professors or scientists or, doctors, you're kind of a little intimidated. And then I realized that they're also intimidated by us, because we're like, oh wow, what they work on is very cool, and they look at robots, oh that's very cool, and so like it's very nice to work with people who want to learn from each other.
Agreed, and again, that's what's so great about this space is where people understand how complicated it is, and they're really willing to listen to people with the expertise in their specific area. So again, not a lot of people in that robotic and pharmaceutical space.
Yeah, it's a great match. Okay, so next question. Let's see. Oh, here. What distinguishes collaborative robots from traditional automation systems, particularly in the context of the pharmaceutical industry's needs?
Oh,
and I
great
guess
question.
Yeah,
for me,
it's a counter question.
Yeah. So, what distinguishes collaborative robots from traditional automated systems? So, this also kind of question for both of us. I'll kind of set it up for you. But so, the smaller area is one of the biggest things I've seen, which I'm sure compared to a traditional cell therapy manufacturing suite, multiply labs robotic system is what, half, 25% of the, it's an incredible space savings.
Sometimes 10x.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with graded pharmaceutical clean room environments, space is at a premium. And it's like the simple example I can come up with is palletizing. So there's traditional industrial robotic palletizing cells sitting at the end of pharmaceutical manufacturing lines that are probably taking up 3 to 4 times the floor space that a cobot palletizer would, right? It's like you have separate air handling units for the space, you have, cleaning requirements, and they're expensive to build in the first place. They have to have special panels, all that stuff. And then you're going to dedicate this huge space to a robot that you can't interact with or do anything with. That's one of the biggest. Number 2 is actually the force feedback, which again, you guys can talk to, and this is, Universal Robots having, top tier tactile feedback capabilities. When you're doing those fine motions, number one, it helps you automate tasks that are done manually previously, as you guys have done. But then also, these are extremely expensive and sensitive products. So if you are having an application where you're handling pharmaceutical products, you want to have that force feedback as a parameter in your system to be able to taper back. And then the other one is the lightweight. So compared to traditional industrial robots, collaborative robots are much lighter. We had a use case with a major pharmaceutical company with one of our robots installed that they were able to replace it in 20 minutes with just a human operator, being able to come in and swap out one cobot for another one. It's like that uptime efficiency is huge. If you have an industrial robot that can weigh hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, it's impossible for a person to go in there and make that change. So I think those are the 3 big things, and I'm sure you're seeing very similar, right? You guys are using the tactile, the force feedback, right? The space saving.
We see all of these, but for us, number 1 is definitely the force feedback. Essentially, if you want to be able for the robots to be equivalent to a manual biomanufacturing process, the robot must have the physical capability of behaving like a person would do. And no person has no tactile feedback, and especially no scientist, right? It's actually a big misconception that we're mostly using our eyes. In fact, for fine tasks, we're mostly using our hands, right? And we feel what's in our hands when we press a button, when we know we click, a cassette in or out.
That force spike.
Yeah, exactly. A robot that doesn't have the sense of touch and force feedback is useless in, advanced biomanufacturing processes, because you can only do very rough and very really non-repeatable coarse tasks, while we need the fine tasks. And so for us, there's never been any alternative to cobots, and that was very clear from day one.
And no, that's a great point. People like to think that there's so many controllables in a system, right? Oh, you program it once, done, right? No, you laugh, right? But it's like, when people think robotics and they think automation, they think that you can lock down that and the world will just fall into line. And that's not the case, right? So again, having those little move to a force, find a position, right, with a force is a huge capability, not just for, safety, but for utilizing within an application.
Yeah, that's what we do manually every time. We know with our eyes what we're doing, where we're going, but we evaluate success based on the tactile feedback. And the robot must be able to do the same. And effectively, a non-cobot is a robot that does not have the sense of touch and interaction with the environment, which is essentially a useless robot. And why would you need to compensate for it when you can get that natively with a cobot?
Exactly.
So, next, can you discuss some surprising applications of collaborative robots that improved efficiency or quality in pharmaceutical manufacturing? For example, every time you're clicking something into something, right, it seems like, it's very easy. All you need to do is to insert this cassette into this slot. And it seems like something so easy. Without a cobot, you would break the cassette or break the slot.
Yeah.
Right? You just, you can be slightly off, and the tiny adjustment you do with your hands, is impossible to a non-cobot.
Exactly. The force seeking, which
Correct.
again is like, so intuitive to people.
And so like even to us it's kind of so surprising because we're like, oh yes, we had to tell the robot to, touch this, wall first and then slide it along, right? It's easy to program it in the cobot, impossible in non-cobot. For a person, you just tell them, hey, insert the cartridge in a slot, and they just do it naturally, right? And so those little things are very surprising. Or like pressing this button, like how do you know that the button is pressed?
Yeah.
Right? You don't really know unless you have a force threshold, right? How do you know that the connector is correctly bolted, right? The ISO specifications are torque. There's like torque locking, right? But no person has a true torque sensor, in their hand, and you don't go there with a torque range. So everybody's kind of like winging it based on, their sense of touch. A cobot can actually measure it. It's actually superhuman in doing this because we can actually hit the ISO specification. And so it's these fine tasks that would be trivial to a person and are either superhuman in a cobot or impossible for a non-cobot.
Yeah, I got another great example of that where it was from a partner of ours, Technicon. They've come up with a glove and gown sampling system. So as you're gowning up to go into a graded area, it's like you have to do plate sampling of people. They've done exactly right. They've taken a cobot and they have basically enabled like a person will go up to it and you have to present your hand to it, and with a certain force, right, it will come and seek your hand and get the exact force, and you can again improves efficiency of people going in and gowning up into these areas. And like if you never gowned up before, you're all, it's impossible. It's so difficult to coordinate and do things and maintain that. And again, if you touch it the wrong way, if you do something, you could implicate the quality of your process. So they've enabled the cobot to, in a truly collaborative environment, to reach out and touch people in their, mask or wherever, and then automate that sampling. And then they've even gotten to the point where they've automated the removal of those from the sampling containment to the testing where they do the growth and then the analysis of it all automatically. So a great example of taking a person, and the next step then would be to get the human even out of that clean room manufacturing step, but still it's like a good first step.
Yeah, I mean, especially in these quality, critical steps, now you have a reliable process which is equivalent to the manual process, but now also way more robust.
Exactly. And again, it's like, okay, I want you to, apply this amount of force to the plate. A person can't do that. Like you said, with the torque, the cobot can, right? Yeah. And then that can become, it's like you start to talk in pharma, you talk commissioning, qualification, validation, and documentation. So then that becomes a parameter with which you can qualify the system and talk about repeatability. You will seek 10 newtons of force on a hand every time.
Yep.
Right? It's like great quality improvement, extremely efficient.
Absolutely, yeah. That's by the way, a fantastic application. Yeah, very good example. Okay, so next is here. What societal perceptions and regulatory hurdles have you encountered when implementing robotics in pharma, and how have you addressed them?
That is a great question. So, having come from the pharmaceutical industry, I spent 5.5 years in Merck, and it is regulatory driven. So I think, I forget who was talking with about this, but like a pharma company, they don't want to be the first to do it, but they also don't want to be last, right? So we're kind of riding this adoption curve, and I'd really seen it at my previous role with traditional robotic systems starting to get acceptance. Having good use cases is one of the best ways, and that's what we're so excited about to be here and meet with your team for, is to be able to show the capabilities of these robots from partners going into large manufacturing companies. Because, kind of to your point, they're not robotic experts. They want to think that they are, but they need the partner network of people who are deploying these systems to be able to gain the expertise and to deploy these solutions.
Yeah. I mean, from our point of view, absolutely. On the regulatory side, the regulatory job, it's a perfect robotic job, right? Because you need to be very precise, very repeatable, always do the same, right? So it's almost like made for robots. Yeah. And so what we notice is that when there is a process, right, like in most pharmaceutical companies that people right now are doing because there's no alternative, they're not really happy to be doing that process. Like, I'm yet to find a person that's happy to be a manufacturing operator for cell and gene therapies. They know it's super important. These are life-saving therapies, right? They know that you can only have that job with like so much training and understanding, right? So they know the responsibility, and almost like the responsibility helps them do it despite the job being so nerve-wracking and boring at the same time, right? Yeah. Because it's always the same thing, but if you make a single mistake, the therapy is gone, right? And so when people see the robots, like, you can see the relief on their faces. They're like, oh, are you telling me that now all the boring stuff, but critical, is gonna be taken care of by the robot with the same or even higher level of care as I can do when I'm concentrated, right? But now I can finally oversee the process and tell the robots effectively what to do, and they will do it, more efficiently for more patients. So what we see from the, societal perspective is actually very different from the usual perception of robots, right? Like, we notice that whenever we have a deployment in a pharma company, like, people fight to be in the team that works on the robot. Yeah. Right? People are drawn to the robots because they just see so much fit between what we're using them and the tasks that before people were forced to do.
And again, so you look at the EMA Annex 1, it directly calls out robotics wherever you can deploy them for that exact reason. Yeah, so you have so many of these tasks where I did a lot of inspection projects in my previous role, and talk about the worst job of like, sitting there and looking individually, and a lot of them are high speed, but like we're seeing now collaborative inspection systems, which are able to do some of these low volume, high value kind of orphan drugs. Yep. And it's like, again, to have a person sit there and, inspect 10,000 of these things, it's like, that's a brutal job. And again, with a medium level of quality versus automating that. And then again, the ability of using artificial intelligence to create, defect sets without even needing to crack or chip or, destroy these very, very valuable products. It's like a huge jump in technology. But again, it's like the risk of, hey, artificial intelligence-based inspection is better a lot of times than traditional ones.
Yeah, I mean...
But how do you, then you have to go and defend that to a regulator, and the industry is slower to adopt that kind of technology, so...
I would say if there is any way, to, kind of like, document that is through the kind of data that the robotic system, would be able to gather.
Exactly.
So that's the direction, both from the what makes sense to do the task and also what makes sense to collect the data. The answer is the same as the robots.
That's exactly what we saw too, is the way that you qualify a traditional automated inspection system is you take a bunch of defects. First of all, you have a manual baseline, right, where all this kind of automation starts. You develop a manual baseline for your process. You prove that you can beat it with automation. And then as long as you're statistically better than your previous process, you're good. You're validated. So again, the technology, kind of how it goes through that black box, not to say it doesn't matter, but the results are what matter, right? And being able to deliver quality and better medicine to the patients is what's important.
Yes, which is like this kind of like being grounded in data is something that the regulators also really care about, because in the end, it's all about the data. Can you prove that these makes the drugs, safer, more effective, higher quality, right? Exactly. And it's all grounded in data. And so typically more robotics means more data. And what we've observed from both the pharma leaders but also the regulators is that there is a fantastic response to more data, which is not true for all industries, but it's definitely true in pharma.
Yeah, you need to look under the hood.
Wonderful. How do you envision the role of human operators evolving alongside the increasing adoption of collaborative robots in pharma manufacturing?
No, that's a great question. And I'll tell you what, I think that it's a big potential for... I still think the operators a lot of the time will be interacting with the robots, just farther away from them. So a great use case of this, which is a kind of pie in the sky idea, is the gloveless isolator. Mm-hmm. Right, which is something that Universal Robots is keen on. From if you've never seen a filling isolator, right, it's a beautiful machine that has glove ports every 4 feet on it, and it's so that an operator, if there's something that goes wrong in there, can stick their hands in this sterile grade A filling isolator and do an intervention. That should be done by a robot. right? It's like, so first of all, this person's gowned up, you're sticking your hands in glove ports, and then you have to handle like tweezers to go and reach and like fix fallen, but exactly, right?
Heavy gloves on.
Right, exactly. So a cobot, it's like we need to be compatible with vaporized hydrogen peroxide to live inside of that filling isolator, but a person should be able to basically drive that robot to be able to do that intervention. And then I know something that we talked about in the past is like higher and higher biosafety level products.
Yeah.
So like as these drugs get more and more potent, they get more and more dangerous to manufacture.
They shouldn't be handled by people.
Exactly. And so, you have this, already strict cleaning requirements that, kind of prohibit people from going in there, because talk about being dirty and non-repeatable people. But people can also get sick and, from these components of these products. So there's a real drive to remove people from the core of this process. So again, it's like, people say, oh, a robot's going to come take your job. It's like, do you want the job handling that like biosafety level 3 or 4 compound? What if there's a glass breakage event in the isolator in an inspection machine, which don't have glove ports at this point, right? It's like having robots in there to be able to clean up those messes and ensure that people aren't around those increasingly dangerous products is going to be the future of pharma manufacturing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. From our point of view, what we have observed is that the people that were doing those tasks are not really ideal for people because they're dangerous, because, a single mistake over, a day or 1,000 repetitions can multi-million-dollar and real life, or death consequence. So the people doing those jobs, I think all of them, they've been wondering, I wish there was a robot that could do this job, and I could tell the robot what to do, right? And I could oversee the robots doing it. And so that's kind of like the relief when people see the robotic systems, right?
Exactly.
And people start using them, because we still need the process intelligence from the expert. In fact, the robots are learning a process from the expert. It's just that now the expert needs to come up with the process and optimize the process, and then the robot can do the boring job. Okay, do that 10,000 times, right? So what we notice is that most of, or pretty much everybody, like nobody dreams of one day being a clean room operator.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's such a hard job, and you need to be in the clean room, you can't even go to the restroom, right? These are people that dreamed of discovering life-saving, therapies and optimizing their processes, right?
Right.
And so they can actually do that job way better because the robots are taking care of the dangerous, sterile, and repetitive part. And so this is the evolution we see. We see people evolving towards the job they always wanted to do, and the robots taking the job that people had to do because nothing else could.
The other 2 areas I always bring up are space and warfare, where it's like you don't catch a lot of pilots complaining that they don't have to fly within the plane anymore, right? It's like they can sit in an Air Force base, right, and just fly the drone remotely, right? It's like the Mars rovers, right? If you had to send a person to drive that, right? It's like, the U.S. sends a car to the moon, right? That's great, but like you can also have a robot do that for much cheaper, much safer, and then much more effectively. So it's like, again, same analogy kind of leading, those are a little bit more extreme, but into pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Yeah, actually, I believe the pharma application is probably one of the most extreme because, you can't have a single cell, being off or contaminated, right? A single bacteria, single, particle in the wrong place means that drug cannot be used.
One sneeze, right?
Correct. It can be any, the blink of an eye, literally. And obviously, in terms of value of the application, nothing is more important than saving lives, right? And so we get back to that, what's the highest, the most valuable thing? Well, that's life. And so we find that, developing robots that, protect life, being, very, very rewarding.
Yeah, and again, having a real impact on people around you, where it's like, it's like I had a moment where like I ran into my old roommate's wife at the time. It's like a product that I had worked on saved your grandmother's life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
cool.
It was incredible, and I'll never forget that, because it's like, hey, I'm making, make robots. Making robots for cars is cool, right? Making, welding robots is cool. But it's like making...
Yeah, how about life-saving robots?
How about life-saving medicine, right? Like that really does, it's like, it sticks with you.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. I hope soon We get the same experiences
Yeah.
too. Here, looking ahead, how do you envision the integration of advanced robotics shaping the pharmaceutical manufacturing landscape in the next decade?
Again, so I think kind of doubling down on the previous point of the gloveless isolator. So the way the isolator technology is probably the greatest development in pharmaceutical manufacturing, just by being able to remove people from that filling operation. I see robots now going one step ahead, and again, that gloveless isolator, where all the interventions in the drug manufacturing process are done by a collaborative robot that lives inside of there. Not part of the main drug filling process, but removing all intervention from a person there. And I think one of the keys there is being able to develop the specific kinds of robots for that application. Again, vaporized hydrogen peroxide capability, high IP rating, high clean room rating, which is really not that big of a hurdle. It's basically material compatibility to meet the VHP, the ingress protection to make sure the VHP doesn't get inside the robot itself, and then a decent enough clean room rating, which compared to like the electronics industry, it's not that much in the pharmaceutical space.
Exactly. I mean, and I completely agree. It's in the future, seeing an isolator with gloves, will be like, how the hell were people doing things this way, right? It would be like inconceivable to do it in any other way than with robotics.
Exactly.
And we believe essentially the same applied to the whole biomanufacturing industry. Like in the future, like making advanced, biological drugs without robotics will seem like oddly, kind of like almost like quaint, kind of a thing of the past, right? It's almost like, oh, cool, you have a painting that was painted by a person, but like when you read the newspaper, on the screen downloaded from the internet, you don't expect someone to have painted the picture, right? And so, right, it's obviously shown on a screen, right? And so that's where we are going, I think, for manufacturing. The way it's done is through robots, and once you see robots doing it, there's just no going back.
Right, but again, it's getting to the point, where the industry is comfortable enough to adopt these robotics for these flexible processes, because kind of as of now, the thing that gets automated is the high-speed, large throughput vaccines. It's like as you start getting into those, lower volume, how do you automate that? That's where I think robots are really going to come in and just, kind of create a whole new age of medicine.
Yeah, and from our vantage point, Universal Robots Multiple Labs, we can very clearly see that future. Okay, last question. What are the most important lessons you wish you could tell yourself 5 years ago about this unique intersectional space between pharma and robotics?
That is a good question. I would say really the team's needed with a good pharmaceutical application, where it's like, I don't know how many people have dealt with the quality organization, but right, you can have the best technology, you can have the best idea. It doesn't matter if you can't get a quality buy-in and that documentation to tell the right story. So, technology is great, and I would actually use Mark Zuckerberg's quote of "move fast and break things." That's the exact opposite of what the pharmaceutical industry
Try
wants
telling
to
that
do.
to the quality department.
I do. That's what I used to do. I would say to the quality team, I'd be like, move fast and break things. That's what we don't want to do. And they're like, yes, exactly, right? So it's like, you show them this cool new system, they're going to start to ask questions immediately. The quality team they're trained to not be like, oh, wow, great new technology, go do that. But really having to say the same thing over and over and over again, and you mentioned data, right? Having good data to back it up, not being able to just, we're going to deploy a robot in 2 weeks. No, these projects are going to take months, years. It's going to be a long adoption cycle, and, 5 years ago, I thought that, it's like this would have gotten adopted much faster, but patience is one of the things I would have told myself.
Those are very valuable lessons. We've definitely experienced those as well. I would say there's two that I would like to add. One is sometimes when adopting a certain innovation, people tend to start from incremental innovation. And so you might say, well, let's start by applying robotics to something that's simple. What we've noticed is that the need is the most burning for the most cutting edge and advanced bioprocesses, like cell and gene therapies. We're talking about really like the pinnacle of, biopharma processes right now. And those where the robots are the most needed. So, focusing, on that, we've seen so much incredible demand that, but it was very counterintuitive, because the temptation at the beginning was, okay, do like a very simple product for a very small, kind of like simple, maybe chemical process. No,
Yeah.
the need is the most burning, for those very, cutting edge projects.
And do it all, right?
Yes.
Do it all, right?
End to end,
yeah.
right? But that's, seen a fantastic response from the market. And the second thing is, there is a tendency, I think, in technology to be kind of like very secretive. And again, we've gone in the opposite direction, which we've learned, and I wish we had learned even earlier, which is we actually publish, on peer-reviewed journal papers, the performance data for the robots.
Yeah.
And we believe that in an industry that's based on data, like pharma, where, reliability is everything, you can't just afford to say, oh yeah, trust me, it works. You have to show the data, and people need that data to be reviewed by independent, unaffiliated experts. And the only way to do it is peer review, right? Or the best way we found as a society to do it is peer review. I guess learned that a couple of years ago, and since then it's been, publication after publication. But this is actually very contrarian in the industry.
Yeah,
and I just don't understand why they don't get it. The data is everything.
No, but that's a great point. Again, it's like one of the biggest things we have to fight for as Universal Robots is basically once a system of ours gets deployed at a large pharmaceutical company, you're not getting a camera in there. You're not going to get to see that application, right? It's like they lock that away, and that's their secret, and they're very secretive with things like that. But again, to your point, it takes a newcomer.
Exactly. They need, their quality department to be kind of like warmed up to the idea. They need the regulators to see the data, right? And so if you keep it a secret, it's actually not a business advantage. It is in fact a adoption disadvantage because nobody knows how well it works.
Yeah, and then of course what actually then ends up happening is, one of the biggest advantages of Universal Robots and you and all these other, kind of pharma suppliers is they'll be like, oh yeah, well we know all the systems that are deployed at these companies anyways. All the pharmaceutical companies like, haha, no one knows about this. It's like, no, all your suppliers know about this already, so they think it's such a secret, but in reality, it's pretty common information. But again, it's just changing that mentality.
Yeah, it's just super important to generate that trust through data.
Yeah, and again, that's what you guys can offer. Again, it's like the ability to come in as the startup with this brand new technology to be able to really show them that this can be done all end to end. It's like someone needed to take that first initial big step, and
yeah, it is true that sometimes I'm asking, hey, can we publish this? And people are like, well, I guess you can. But they would never have come up with that idea on their own. It's just so different from how a pharma company normally works. Well, wonderful. That's it. It was a pleasure, Connor. Thank you for being here. And this is a great conversation.
Looking forward to continuing the work together.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.